Hello and welcome. My name is Redboot, and welcome to this playthrough of Pendragon, The Fall of Rome and Britain, designed by Marc Gouyon-Rety, and it's from the Coin series and published by GMT Games, which was designed by Volko Ruhnke. So before we get started today, there's a handful of errors from the last video that I need to clear up. Some of them bookkeeping in nature and minor, and some of them a little bit more significant. So let me turn to that first. First of all, the Dukes won 3 battles, I adjusted their prestige. When I say they won 3 battles, I mean they won 3 battles in which they destroyed more pieces than they lost. So they actually, but I didn't adjust prosperity plus prestige, so I'm going to do that now. Now, a little bit later we'll find out in Parisi, because they could not have gone into that area to intercept, they would not have won that battle, so I'm only going to bump it by 2. And I'm going to move Duck's prestige down from 3 to 2, and then that will make that accurate, and I'll fix the Parisi situation in a few minutes. The other thing is I gave the Scotti a little bit too much credit for winning 2 battles when they actually lost more pieces than they destroyed. So there's 2 more Scotti renown than is appropriate, so I'm going to move that from 8 to 6. Now those are the little bookkeeping issues. The more significant issue is there were 2 errors pointed out by a number of people. Light Lampdog and No Faith among them, as well as Sebastian Deschacht. And I thank them very much for their diligence in both observing the game and in posting what the problem was. So there were two related errors. One is that I messed up the amount of damage that was done by both sides during the assault and escalade phases in a couple of areas, so I'm going to correct that. And then, most importantly, in Parisi, also in Navantai, those areas were not controlled at the outset of the intercept phase by the Dukes, by the Britons, and therefore I could not have intercepted into those areas. So I'm going to correct those problems now. So first of all, in Novante, I gave myself too much credit during the escalade phase because I gave myself 1 instead of half for the garrison unit. So I did 3 damage instead of 2. However, on the ensuing assault phase, I did 0 damage instead of 2. So the net of that is that I need to remove 1 Scotti raider. In addition to that, the cavalry that moved from Karwaitii into Nawantai could not have moved there because they couldn't intercept into an uncontrolled area. So I'm going to move the cavalry back into Karwaitii. So that'll fix the problem for Nawantai. In Dumnonii, similar problem. I gave myself too much credit on the escalade phase, and I gave myself not enough credit on the ensuing assault phase. In this case, I was +1 on the escalade phase and -3 on the assault phase because this was a town, so there's an additional garrison unit. So I should have destroyed an additional 2 raiders. So I'm going to make that change now. Those 2 raiders come off the board, and their plunder goes away. Now the most difficult error to fix is in Parisi because first of all, I made the error, the same error in terms of the amount of damage that was done. So when the cavalry moved in, which they weren't supposed to do, there actually should not have been 5, but only 4 plunder-laden units in Parisi. And that's because I gave myself too much credit on the Escalade phase and not enough credit on the Salt phase. But more importantly, I could not have intercepted into Parisi because Parisi was not controlled at that time. So the movement into Eboracum from Parisi was not legal. So I'm going to move those Dux pieces back. I've already adjusted the Dux prestige for that. Because that was not a one battle. And I think the only other thing that I need to do is move up the Dux resource, the Britain resources by 1. Because the Eboracum I should have paid for because I moved some units down to Durotriges. But the Nwantai units would not have spent the Britain resources, so I'm going to move that up from 11 to 12. And I think that fixes all of the errors, so thank you for everybody. Oh, and I'm sorry, and I passed as the Scotti in the last round, and I did not move up their resources by 1, so I'll do that now from 6 to 7, and thank you to Paul B654 for pointing that out on the Board Game Geek forums. So I think that's all of the errors fixed. And now we're going to move on to the next turn and the next card. Now, as we saw in the last turn, the Evangelization Card is next. And the Scotti have that card first. And it's a shield card, so it's a high priority card for them. However, when I rolled to see whether they were going to return and settle, I rolled low. I rolled a 4, and since they have more troops and plunder on the board than that, that's what they're going to do. They're going to return and settle. So the warbands in Dumnonii, having done their damage, are going to return to Hibernia or Caledonia or wherever they came from. And the Scotti and Parisi are going to do the same with their plunder. So that's 6 plunders so far, and they return. And in Nwantai, they will do the same, but Nwantai is actually going to be the region where they make an attempt to settle. So I'm going to move the plunder aside. There are 4 Scotti raiders returning. And now we roll the dice, and on rolls of 5 or 6, we roll once for each Scotti raider returning. That's 4. And for every roll of 1 to 6, 5 or a 6, we place a warband. So I'm going to roll 4 dice, 1 for each warband. And we roll a 5 and a 6, along with a 2 and a 3. So 2 warbands will be placed in Nwantai. So I take 2 warbands from the Scotti inventory. I place them in Nwantai. Now, the other part of the settle command, feat I should say, is that they can they could remove 2 of the warbands to place a settlement there. But the AI says, the bots say, that they won't do that unless there'll be at least 1 warband left over. And since there are only 2, they're going to have to wait until the next opportunity. So those warbands are there, and they will have to be eradicated by the local militia or the Dux, or they will stay there and plant their feet and possibly build a settlement there at some point in the future. And as we can see, the Kibitates are next up on the card, and that makes it my turn. And I think this is a very attractive card. It basically increases by a fair amount, by 1 resource, any Scotti raid for the rest of the game. That's what the yellow symbol means, is that it counts for the rest of the game. So Scotti raids on 1 renown cost 1 renown to roll 1d4, cost 2 renown to roll d4 instead of 0 and 1. So I think that's pretty powerful. So I'm going to take that. I'm going to take that card, and I'm going to place it up by the Scotti as the Kibitate's turn for this round. And first, a little bit of bookkeeping. The Scotti player ended up taking 9 plunder back with them. So they go from 7 all the way up to 16 for their renown. And I'll have to look and see if that has an impact. I don't believe it does on their pivotal event card. No, because there's no threshold on their card. It still is not in effect at this point. And in addition, we'll move the sequence of play. Scotti did a faction command and feat, and the Civitates took the event. So now we're done with that card. We move the Saxons over to eligible, and we move the Scotti and Civitates to ineligible. And let's take a look at the next card. So the next card is the Barbarian Alliance card. And I've looked at this, and I don't think it's a terribly attractive card for the Dux, which is the first eligible unit. So I'm not going to take that event. But before I move on, let me flip over this card, and it's the Anona Card. So looking at this card and looking ahead, we see that the Saxons are second in line, and they have a shield behind their symbol, which means that they're, in all likelihood, they're going to take this event if given a chance. And their event is treachery in one region with any warband or federati. Remove all Dux pieces. Well, that's not an effective... I guess that's not effective because there are no warbands or federati on the board in the same region as a Dux piece. That said, let me do a little bit of thinking about how to proceed here. I'm thinking about moving from Karwei on March up into Nwantai to try to get rid of those 2 warbands up there. That would entail a limited command, which would still give the Saxons an opportunity to raid and do it in several regions. So I might want to do something a little bit more dramatic than just move in one region. So let's see. Let me think about this, and let me come back and see if we agree on which way to go. Well, having thought about this a little bit, I'm a little bit of a conundrum because I'd like to be able to get some troops, including some federati, into Karwei and then march them into Nwantai to try to pick off the potential settlement up there. The problem is that the Barbarian Alliance card allows me in one region with any warband or federati to remove all Dux pieces. So if I invite federati into Karwei, that will then qualify them. And I believe since this is a shield, there's a strong chance that the Saxons would actually use this event to get rid of some Dux pieces. And Dux pieces are not easy to come by. I don't want to just waste them. So I think what I'm going to do is do a march command with a requisition and start to build up some resources for a little bit later when there's some potential of fragmentation, although it's a little early in the game for that. But I guess I'm going to consider it saving for a rainy day at this point. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to march. And the only thing I'm going to do on that score is I'm going to march 1 Dux unit into Karwei. So that's going to cost me 2 resources. And actually, I take that back. I think rather than doing that, I'm going to use march, but I'm actually not going to march any units. I believe I can do that. I can declare a march and then march 0 units. And then I'm going to do a requisition. And my requisition is going to be in textuality. It's got to be in a place where there are Dux pieces and a Civitate stronghold. So I can do it in textuality. I can do it in Coriol Tivani, in Iceni. I can do up to 6. Trinovantes. All right, so I'm going to do 6. There's more than 6 that qualify, so I'm not going to go ahead and mark those all. And then, as a requisition feat, the Dux are going to move their resources up to 6. And the Kiwitates are going to move their resources down to 6. So we move the Dux sequence of play piece to command plus feat, even though I didn't use the command. And we'll kind of sit back and see what the Saxons do. So the Saxons can do an event plus a limited command. Of course, limited command in their case is meaningless because they are the bot and they are allowed to take a full command plus feat. And they're not going to use the event. I'm going to take a look at this, but I believe the event at this point is immaterial because there is no region on the board where there is a warband, Federate, and Dux pieces. So I assume that means that they're going to raid. So yes, indeed, the Saxons are going to raid, and they're going to raid in areas where there is the least or the most difference between troop protection and plunder. Troop protection and population. That is to say, the least protected population. So they're going to raid once again in the undefended Parisi. They're going to raid in Catalavani. And finally, they're going to raid down here in Trinovantes. So I'm going to roll for these. All of them have subtraction of -3 for 3 forts in the Oceanus Germanicus. So let's check and see how they do. First of all, let's reduce the resources. They're going to be using 2 resources for each. So they go down from 11 to 5 resources. And next we'll do our die rolls. So we roll 3 die 4s. I think I might have said die 6s, but we roll 3 die 4s. So let's roll in Parisi first. And we roll 6 minus 3 is 3. In Corioltavi, we roll 7 minus 3 is 4. And finally, we roll 5 minus 3 is 2 in Trinovantes. So 3 Saxon Raiders in Parisi. 4 Saxon Raiders in Corioltavi. And 2 Saxon Raiders down here in Trinovantes. So going in reverse order, the first thing they do is plunder. So in Trinovantes, they're going to plunder 2 prosperity. In Corioltavi, they're going to plunder 2 prosperity because the population is 2, so they're limited to the population. And up in Parisi, they plunder 2 as well. Now, one thing we need to establish here is I've been operating under the assumption that they're going to use surprise rather than ravage. So let me just double check that with the bots. Yeah, so because the Britain control is within 2 or higher of the Britain control victory marker, which is at 30, both are at 36 right now, this is going to be a ravage. So that means in Parisi, they will take this additional plunder. Parisi hasn't done very well. And in Corioltavi, they will also take the additional plunder. Because they are not constrained in a ravage feat by the population of the countryside. So now, because this is a ravage command, we roll to see if the population has been depleted. And we'll roll first for Parisi. On a roll of 4 to 6, the population is decreased by 1. So there's a 6 in Parisi. In Corioltavi, there's a 5 and a 2 in Trinoantes. So the population is depleted in Parisi and Corioltavi. So we have a little bookkeeping here to do. First of all, let's mark Parisi and Corioltavi with population 1 markers, since the population has gone down by 1. Second of all, that creates refugees, 2 of them to be exact, that go into the Civitatis available forces and can be re-added to the population at a later time. Next, the total prosperity has been decreased by 9 total, so population total prosperity goes from 66 to 57, and prosperity plus prestige goes from 68 to 59. And because the population suffered, Britain control actually moves from 36 down to 34, since they control less population now. And now again, because a ravage feat was used, the Dux and Civitates are allowed to force a fight. They obviously can't do that in Parisi because there are no units up there to force a fight with. It doesn't make any sense to do it in Corioltavi because there's only 1 militia at this point to 4 Saxon raiders. So there'd be a mutual destruction, I think, of 1 unit. And we are in the fens, so we might even get ambushed. I guess that really doesn't make that much of a difference, but I'd rather not do a trade-off at this point and use the militia later as a defending unit in the stronghold. And then in Trinoantes, we only have 1 militia unit to 2 Saxons, and again, I don't think it makes sense for us to initiate a battle there either. So with that, I think we're done with this turn. All right, let's move over to the sequence of play, and the Dux and the Saxons are going to move to ineligible, and the Scotti and the Civitates are going to move to eligible, and we are going to move to the next card. The next card is the Anona Card, which allows Anona for Saxon Federati to be initiated now, which is going to be an ineffective card. So we'll put that here, and we will flip over as the next card the Omens card. We'll read that a little bit later. So we see that of the eligible factions, the Scotti are next. So we see by the sequence of play that because there aren't enough Scotti on the map, for the most part, the Scotti are also going to raid. Now the Scotti can raid in 4 regions, so let me take a look at the bot and see what's going to happen here. Okay, having rolled and done the tiebreakers and so forth, the Scotti are indeed going to raid. They're going to raid in 4 regions, and they're going to raid in Nowantai because they have units there. They're going to raid in Karwetii and, Wotandini because they are adjacent to where they have units. And then finally, they're going to raid in Textawerde because the tiebreakers dictated that, largely because it's a hills region and it's home terrain for them. Remember, we have the Evangelization Card, which for the rest of the game increases the cost to the Scotti of their raids. So this is 2 2d4 raids and 1 1d4 raid. So that is going to be 7 resources used. And since they have 16, they're going to move from 16 to 9. So now let's roll to see how large these raids are. Now all these raids are by unpatrolled sea, so there's no there's no subtraction. So first in Karwei-Ti, we roll for 2. In Nwantai, we roll 4. In Wotadini, we roll 3. And finally, in Texta-Werde, we roll 3. So 2, 4, 3, and 3. So let's go ahead and get those out. 2 in Karwei-Ti, 4 in Nwantai, 3 in Wotadini, and 3 in Texta-Werde. Whoops, 3 in Texta-Werde. All in unpatrolled seas. Now the Scotti will once again be doing this with a ransom feat, because there are no higher priority targets inland from the areas that are being raided. So with that in mind, they're going to take 1 cube in Karwei-Ti. In Nwantai, they are also going to take 1 cube. In Wotadini, they're going to take 2 plunder cubes. And finally, in Texta-Werde, limited by the population, they're going to take 2 plunder cubes. It takes a steady hand to play this game sometimes. That is 2, 4, 6 plunder. So we'll go ahead and reduce total prosperity to 51 and prosperity plus prestige to 53. While we're up here in this corner, move the Scotti to command plus feat, which enables the Civitates to take the event or limited command. Finally, we check for ransom. Since there are 4 regions, we'll roll 4 die 6. And we roll a 5 and a 6, so there will be a transfer of 2 resources from Britain to Scotti Renown. So Scotti Renown goes up to 11, and Britain resources go down to a measly 4. And it looks to me like there's not going to be any battle because, for a variety of reasons. So in Karwei-Ti, there's only 2 raiders, and there are 2 Duk's cavalry guarding the fort, so there's virtually no chance, even with an ambush, that they will have a successful assault of the fort. In fact, there is no chance. So they're not going to battle there. In Nwantai, they're not going to battle simply because there's nothing to battle. They've already taken that province, and in fact have control of that province now with warbands there. I need to change that in a few moments. And then the Wotadini, in Wotadini there are 3 raiders, and there are 4 militia, plus 2 hill forts. And once again, there will be no chance of them having a successful assault because they would be eradicated in the battle phase before the assault ever took place. And similarly, in Texta-Werde, there are 3 Duk's cavalry guarding the fort and only 3 raiders. So they don't have any chance of taking over in Texta-Werde. We didn't have quite the rolls that we had last time with the Saxon raiders, and so rather with the Scotti raiders, and so it's not quite as lucrative a raid this time. Now, as I mentioned, Nwantai is now under Scotti control, so we'll place a control marker there. Now the Civitates are next, and they can take the event if they choose, and that would be to skip the next Anona, which is the assessment of annual dues for Federati. That could be useful. At the moment, we're not really recruiting a lot of Federati, and from a strategic standpoint, I'm really a little bit undecided about the value of Federati. I think probably will end up recruiting more of them later as more of my pieces come off the board. But right now, with relatively full complement of pieces, I don't think it makes sense for us to take the event. So therefore, I can take a limited command, and that's what I intend to do. And I can't think of a better place to take a limited command than in Wotadini, where there are 4 militia guarding 2 population and having the opportunity to kill 3 raiders. And since the raiders are in their home terrain, and since they are fighting alone, according to the non-player battle tactics, they are going to attempt to evade and do so on a roll of 4 to 6. So let's go ahead and make that roll. And we roll a 2, so they fail to evade. And since they fail to evade, they're essentially going to be wiped out because the 4 militia do 2 damage. Each one of these is worth a half, so 1.5 total in a field battle. So those will be removed and the militia will be victorious. Now actually, since there were 2 plunder, I'm allowed as a battle consequence to replace one of the plunder in that region, and that's what I'm going to do, back into prosperity. So that will increase prosperity by 1 up to 52, and prosperity plus prestige up 1 to 54. And I think that's it. There are no other adjustments. This was just limited command. It costs no resources to battle, so for the Cubitatis to battle without marching or anything, so we're done with the Cubitatis turn. So we will move the Scotti and the Cubitatis to ineligible, and the Dukes and the Saxons to eligible. So we will move the Omens card to the active card, which means the Saxons go first. The Dukes, as the next eligible faction, will go next, and we will flip over the Lindsay card. So let's see what happens next. Well, probably not surprisingly, according to the bots, the Saxon player is going to do a return command with a settle feat. And so it will return in Parisi, Corioltawi, and Trinowantes. And it's going to attempt to settle in Corioltawi because that is the place where it has the most Saxon raiders. So first of all, we're going to take all 9 of the plunder and the Saxon raiders off the map. And we're going to add 9 Saxon renown, moving it from 5 up to 14. And next we'll focus on Corioltawi here, Corioltawi, and let's see if the Saxons are successful in settling. There were 4 raiders returning, and they need 4 to 6 on a roll of on a 1d6 for each one in order to determine if warbands are placed. So let's roll 4 1d6s, and we rolled a 4. So only 1 warband is placed in Corioltawi. So we'll place the warband there. And I believe that that's not going to be enough since there's no settlement, or we can't replace warbands with a settlement because there's not enough warbands. That's going to be the end of the Saxon turn for the Omens card. Which moves us to the Dukes. Now looking at the card, which I am allowed to take, I can take this card and I could discard it during a field battle or assault initiated by someone else to have any units I choose, or if I'm eligible, I can discard it before the first eligible faction acts to become the first eligible myself on the current card. So I am allowed to do that. I'm not sure that card is all that attractive. So the Saxons have taken a command plus feat, and therefore the Dukes can take an event plus a limited command. And I think with my limited command, what I'm going to do is I'm going to move some Dux units from Eberacum, 2 of them, into Karwati, which cost me 2 resources, and that's because it looks like there's going to be a settlement coming up in Nwantai for the Scotti, and I'd like to be poised to be able to march up there with an effective force in order to destroy it. Now, what that means, of course, is that I'm not going to do a battle in Textawerdi or Karwati to try to eliminate some of those raiders. So those raiders might get away. That was certainly one option, was to destroy the raiders in Textawerdi. But I can only do so much, and I'd like to get my troops out of Eberacum right now and into more useful places. So I am going to do that march command. So with that, we move the Civitates and the Scotti to eligible and move the others down to ineligible. And let's go ahead and move the cards. Lindsay is the next card, and the next eligible faction to be able to use it is going to be the Civitates. And Vortigern is the next card. So with that, I think we'll wrap this episode up. We got through 4 cards, which was a little bit better than the 3 we got through the first time, and I think a little bit better time even. But since it's been a week or so since I've gotten a video out, I think I'm going to go ahead and get this one into the editor and start working on the next one soon. So hope you enjoyed it, and please like the video if you do like it. Subscribe if you are so inclined to subscribe, and see what happens for the rest of the game. And I will be back soon. Thank you.